Hello and welcome to the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. So today I want to talk about something that I've been waiting to talk about. I've been waiting for a little bit, trying to recover from my retreat at Dr. Joe Dispenza's, my first time ever week-long retreat that I did. And I wanted to share my story. I wanted to share what I gained from it. And I know that what I'll have to share is going to influence or inspire somebody listening today. So stay tuned. Episode number 218 of the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. Welcome to the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. I'm Michelle, a fertility acupuncturist here to provide you with resources on how to create a wholesome approach to your fertility journey. So I've been back for about a month since my Dr. Joe Dispenza retreat. My friend and I started calling him Dr. Joey D, or just Joey D. We are originally from New York, and I don't know why that just stuck, but it did. And so my friend ended up getting a ticket with me. We both got tickets. They sold out really fast, and we were very excited to go. And before going, you actually have to take a course online for his progressive retreat. So it was like the original training of his information, his method. And so it's really intensive. It's a very intensive, long, and I forget the exact name. I think it's progressive, intensive, something. Anyway, so you have to take this course online beforehand. And the course is basically him talking about not only like what he's learned about the mind, but also some of his studies, some of the studies that they've done in the retreats on the participants. And he goes over really the theory of everything that he bases his method on. And then we also did some meditations and his very, very special breath that awakens. I use the word Kundalini. He doesn't use words like that or chakras because he feels that sometimes those conjure up like an idea that it's too woo-woo, and he really wants to talk to the mass. So he's amazing in his way of translating things in scientific terms so that a lot of people actually that are doctors or have a scientific background are actually there and do go to his retreats because they want to learn, kind of like me in a sense. They want to learn what they can bring back to their patients, to their practices, or they're just really intrigued about it and want to learn more. It was absolutely fascinating, I have to say. It was very intensive. Every day we would have to be there at 6 a.m., and one of the days we had to be there at 4 a.m. because that was the pineal gland meditation. I can't even say enough. I mean, I really don't even know where to start. It was just so mind-blowing. Like the whole thing was so amazing. One thing I will say about Dr. Joe is that he is so intent on teaching people and empowering them, like teaching people how much potential they actually have within themselves. And if you think about it, society dumbs us down. It really does. I mean, I have to say, I don't really talk much about this on the podcast, but I just feel it. I see, the devices, just a lot of what we see on TV. It really doesn't accentuate just how powerful we are. So it is something that I notice in general. And we're always taught that we have to depend on so many other things in order to get well. And I feel the passion coming from him that he really wants to get the message out that people can actually heal themselves and that we have so much potential and so much greatness. And he uses the word unlimited. And he says, yeah, while science is amazing and he really does research like so much, and he has such a great opportunity to do the research because he uses the participants maybe half of them, or even more than half, give consent to be studied. And it is such an amazing opportunity for him to use, and his research team. He has a huge research team that sit in the back of the retreat. And it is an amazing opportunity. They measure the blood, they measure brain waves, they measure even microbiome in the gut, actually measure stool to see. And it shows that actually the microbiome increases after the retreat, and they get more of a variety. And like, so many things are crazy. Like, they even see that the body's producing certain chemicals, like almost like its own pharmacy. And he says, how is that even possible? Like, where is that coming from? Where is that chemical, or that whatever it is that they're measuring that all of a sudden increases? Some of them are actually meant to suppress cancer. Where is that coming from if we're not taking a medication? And that's the question. I mean, these are things that are so mysterious and so incredible and mind-blowing. And they just show how much more we need to learn about the human body and the human mind. And he started out talking about the power of the mind body for many years. And really, as the years went by, he really dug deep into why and how, and like, how can we look at this? But what he says is that we still, even with all of the amazing research and the proof, we shouldn't depend on studies in order to become unlimited within ourselves. And I always felt that myself. Studies are amazing, but we shouldn't depend on them. We shouldn't wait on them to still explore and still validate our own anecdotal experience. Anecdotal means like it's an experience that you actually have yourself. And it was fascinating. So again, where do I begin? There's just so much. So we went every day, started meditations. We did about at least 3 a day. I think it was about 3 a day. And each meditation, mind you, is like at least an hour. So you're really immersed in meditation. And then in between meditations, he talks and he explains the science behind how our mind works and how we perceive things, and how those perceptions and those habits that are so ingrained become our reality. And he really goes into the theory and also science, like things that they've actually seen in their own research. And he has people that are part of the research team come up and talk about their findings. They even had a random event generator in the back of the stage that just went off. It goes all over the place. That's what it is. It's a random event generator. It's random. And so they find within that, there's like a map that shows what is normal for that generator and what would be abnormal and almost too organized to even be possible. So then it comes out of these like charts or these lines as something that's not typical, or the odds are very low for it to be so organized, if that makes sense. Hopefully that makes sense. And so what they found was when we did something called the coherence healing, and that's when people broke up into groups and would find, they would actually select healies. So people would come in that weren't able to walk. People were in there that weren't able to, that had cancer, that had really debilitating diseases or after stroke. And they would select people and put them as a healie. And they would basically lay down in the middle of what was surrounded by healers. So we would basically face them. We were sitting in a chair and sitting across from other healies. So we're facing each other. The healers, are facing each other. The healie, who are the people getting healed, are laying down. And then we start to focus and heal on them. So when we would do that, the random event generators started acting different. They started making more sense, and they started defying the odds of what is typical for them. And it was just mind-blowing. So they showed all these different things that would happen when we would start working together. And then he also talks about how when you do have a group of people that are collective in their energy and their intention, things start to change and we start to act like a school of fish or a flock of birds and now everywhere I go, I constantly see birds. And I feel like the birds are syncing up more than they have before. It's amazing. Like, how do they sync up so well and in such unison? And so he talks about this. He calls it coherence. And when our brains, the both sides of our brains start to work together, they're not random. They start to work in coherence. So it's almost like our brains can act like a random event generator when we have so much going on and we're constantly distracted and moving from one wavelength to the next with our devices or emotions, and things start to be incoherent, is what he's saying. It becomes almost chaotic. So our brains start to function in a way that's chaotic. They actually drain us. They don't work together. They're not unified. And it actually makes it harder for the brain to make sense or to use almost like this intelligent coherence. And the same thing with the body. And so when we do get into this coherence, and listen, I'm probably butchering a little bit of this because I'm trying to speak of what he spoke, and it's so much information. So it's hard to really explain it in the same way. But once we do get into an organized pattern, that organized pattern, I guess I would really translate it as this harmony between the yin and the yang. When the yin and the yang start to balance, and that's when there's an opening to healing. So that's how I see it, because that's how I was trained. So that's how I make sense of it, is when we get to this like perfect unity, harmony, balance, and we allow that state, that is when things start to happen. As far as our vitality, our health, everything starts to come together. And he talks about connecting to the quantum field. This quantum field has all of the information. It's almost like, I guess, I'll use Akashic records. I know he doesn't like using those kind of terms because he's speaking to the masses, and sometimes people will think, oh, this is like woo-woo. It doesn't make sense. It's kind of like too out there. So he uses scientific terms, but I'll use it because I use that. And, most of my audience does relate to it. But the Akashic records, where everything manifests from, or it comes from, is recorded, like everything. So he talks about that as the quantum field. And I like to kind of compare what has been talked about. We talk about the third eye. This has been talked about for centuries. And he talks about the pineal gland. And if you look at the pineal gland, it looks like the eye of Horus. And that I found to be so fascinating. It looks like an eye. And it actually has crystals in it. And he does this breath that awakens it. It actually activates it. And so a lot of this is very much correlating to all of the things that I learned when I studied Kundalini. So people would have these amazing experiences. They would start shaking and they would start feeling this immense bliss. That was not new to me because I learned about this when I was studying Kundalini. It's called Kundalini rising. It basically is an experience that not everybody has. It's like once in a while you'll have somebody in India who does these deep meditations and deep yoga practices for every single day for many, many hours. And they would get to the state of Kundalini rising, this bliss, nirvana. And then they would get healing. Healing would start to occur. Their body would release energy, and all this pent up energy that was stuck in the body would get released. And then it would allow for that harmony, that yin and the yang, that balance, so that the body can get to a state of its original health. It's like its original state. And so many things. I mean, my brain had an orgasm just listening to everything that was going on. I was like, oh my God. And he describes it as an orgasm, actually a mental orgasm, when people have this Kundalini rising. I didn't quite have that, but I had this like, oh my God, all these things that I've learned before, it all like is starting to make sense, but it's scientifically shown now. Now it's shown in science. So he bridges, which is what I love about him, is he bridges science and the mystical. And he's always been intrigued about the mystical, but he's also always been intrigued by the science. So he's bridging that in a way that is so eloquent. And what I really, beyond all of the amazing work that he does, what I love about him is that he is so genuine in his and pure in his teaching. Like, he genuinely wants people to learn. He genuinely wants to empower people. He genuinely wants to awaken people to their power. And that is what I feel from him. He barely talks about himself, and he actually says, don't focus on me. Like, he doesn't want the focus on, he wants the focus on the teaching. He wants the focus on the teaching. He just wants to be the messenger. And he doesn't promote himself a lot. Like, the only time he ever mentioned anything is when he talked about his meditations at the end. And really, it's because people would do better to continue meditating and using these methods and bringing it into his life. But he is really special, I have to say. I mean, I've gone to retreats before where people have not been, even though you're coming to see them, they'd have other speakers, they'd have other things. And yes, he had other speakers, but it was his research team, and he would sit there with them, and he was there the whole time. He was there the whole time. Like, he's in it. He is in it to teach. And if anybody has the opportunity to see him, and I will say, you could also do his courses online, you're still going to benefit. I actually met somebody there who said she had an experience before even coming and seeing him in person. The reason why seeing him in person is so amazing, it's not just him. That's the thing. It's the whole unit, the whole community. It's the coherence between all of the people, and the way his types of meditations conjure up a certain level of vibration and emotion that is connecting between, I mean, literally, I feel like we're neurons, or we're like circuits of energy working and operating together in unison. There is nothing like, I've never in my life experienced anything like this ever. And it was really hard to come back to life. It was hard to come back and explain what I felt. It was hard. You can't explain exactly what you feel. And I felt like an alien for sure. And everybody who's gone to his retreats understands what that means. So if anybody's listening and you're like, yes, I've been to his retreat, you get what I'm saying. Like, no doubt. I know unequivocally you understand what I mean when I say that. And I even remember thinking to myself, like, I'm going to make a conscious effort not to talk about it all the time to my husband, because it's just going to be too much. Like, I'm just going to like become it. And it's funny because he says this, he says, the moment you stop, he goes, the way to know that you really get it and embody whatever you're learning here is the moment that you stop talking about it. Well, of course I'm talking about it now, but because I have to tell you guys how amazing it was, and to even look into watching his YouTube. So there was a woman who I met there, and she didn't necessarily have an experience at the place, during the retreat. She actually had an experience beforehand just by doing his meditations. And I highly suggest taking his course before doing the meditations. His course actually does have the meditations in there. So that's what she did. She did that because you need to do that in order to prepare for the retreat. It's a prerequisite. So she took the course, she started doing the meditations at home, and she had severe allergies, severe food allergies, like really, really bad. Like, she barely could eat anything. And she did the meditation. All of a sudden, she had this crazy experience, and a lot of people describe it very similar, where she felt like an electric charge going through her body, an insane amount of light. It's blinding light with her eyes closed and sometimes even covered with eye mask. People see blinding lights. This is what they describe. So she saw this blinding light, like it was so bright, and she woke up from it, and she knew right then and there she didn't even know. She went ahead and ordered Uber Eats with all the worst foods that, like, all the things that she was allergic to, knowing that she's not going to have any symptoms or reactions. So she ordered it, got it at home, and she ate it, and she was fine. And it was like insane. And she felt this amazing bliss too. That's another thing that people describe with this. So then I spoke to another person there. I was actually somebody. Okay, so we did this. Sorry, so much to say. So we did the pineal gland meditation. So that's like the big one. That's the 4 a.m. And I have mentioned before, I have fibroids. So, sometimes it actually gets in the way of I have to go to the bathroom. It actually like kind of constricts my bladder, especially in the morning. I like to drink a lot because I feel like really thirsty. And so I end up like having to go to the bathroom a lot. So I didn't drink a lot because I was worried that I was going to have to go to the bathroom, which caused me to have a bit of a migraine. We go there at 4 a.m. We start right away. He says, if you're not going to be here, you have to go outside. You can't go in and interrupt people that are doing it. Like, he was really firm. Like, you got to be here by 4 a.m. or you're not doing this. So we came there at 4 a.m., started at 4 a.m. I was really worried about going to the bathroom, but I was like, whatever, I'll be fine. I did start having a little bit of a migraine. So we go into this meditation, and basically this meditation is really to awaken the pineal gland. So we do breath work, we lay down, we get back up. It's like this whole thing. And a woman was right next to me. I can hear her sobbing and sobbing and sobbing the whole time. So this is basically my experience. I'm just like sitting there. We're all like sardines sitting there, but it's okay. When we have to lay down, it's just kind of part of the whole process, and you're fine with it. You're just comfortable. And I hear her sobbing the whole time, but in the meantime, I'm kind of like in and out of this like state. I have this headache, but it's kind of coming in and out, and I'm just like, okay, I'm like in and out of the state. And at one point, I start to taste something that my dad used to get me, and it's so strange, but it was like a food that he used to get me from a place. And I remember it just brought me back to my dad. And then I start seeing my dad. My dad had passed, and I start seeing him kind of like fading in and out. I was like, oh my God, like this is like almost like a way for him to get my attention. And I start to see him. And then later on that day, I bring up something, and I just mention a name of a product, but it happens to be his name, his first name. I was like, that's weird. That just kind of like randomly came. And then I go to the bathroom, and we're like in a convention center. So there's a ton of stalls. I end up at one of the stalls, and there's a little square piece of M&M, like a square. And it was like this perfect square piece of like an M&M wrapper. And what's crazy is that my dad used to call us M&Ms. So it was weird because it was like I had this strange visit and signs from my dad and synchronicities that came from that meditation. And then after so I'm talking about after, but let's go back to the meditation. So when I get out, I see the lady that was next to me. She was an older lady. And I start talking to her, and she goes, wow, wow, wow. And this is the lady that was sobbing next to me. And I asked her, how was your experience? And she said, it's crazy. She goes, first of all, she connected with her son who has passed. She had adopted a son. And then she said, then all of my miscarried babies' souls came to me one by one by one. Oh my God, I get the chills. And she said she just was bawling. She could see every single one of them. And it turns out she ended up adopting 2 kids because she had endometriosis. And this is back in the day. This is before IVF. And she had endometriosis. She had multiple miscarriages, like really many. I would say 7 or more that she experienced in her life. And she didn't have the technology that we have today. And it was just so crazy. I'm thinking to myself, like, I do this. This is my work, fertility. And like, I end up happening to sit next to this woman to my right. It just like the whole experience was so crazy that it was just like mind blowing. I was like, oh my God. So then I'm talking to her, just hearing her experience, and we exchanged numbers, and it was just a really, really intriguing experience that I had. And how do you explain that? How do you explain all these things? And I can hear her like the whole time sobbing, but yet she comes out of it feeling like she was in awe. She said, wow, that was amazing. Like it gave her this sense of closure, which is just like, there's no words to describe it. And then I get on the elevator and I see a couple, and the couple comes in and they go, how was it this morning? And I was like, it was amazing. Oh, before I forget, we get up out of the meditation. He goes, okay. He goes, it's 9:00 now. I want you guys to come back by 11. Okay, so let's do the math. We start at 4 a.m. 9:00. We were there for 5 hours. I was like, what? Like, I thought it was just an hour, maybe an hour and a half. Like, it was like time stopped existing. I thought he was joking. And I was like, well, let me turn, our phones were off. I was like, when I turned on the phone, I'm like, he's probably messing with us because everybody's like looking around laughing. No, it was 9:00. It was actually a little after 9. I was like, wow. I mean, I can't even tell you. So anyhow, I see this couple and they asked me how it was. I'm like, oh, it was crazy. And how's yours? And so they said, well, it was really strange. She goes, I have a lot of people wear eye masks. And she goes, I have my eye mask. And like to the right of me, I see this like really, really bright light. And she's like, that's so weird. She goes, I thought somebody was like turning their phones on or their like flashlight on their phone. I'm like, what the heck is going on? Like, why is somebody turning that on? She's like, but why would I even see it? I have an eye mask on. And she's like, that's so strange. But she, then she just continued on into her meditation. And then turns out her husband was to her right. And he had one of those experiences. He had this like electric charge go through him and he saw this blinding light. And she was so connected to him that she was able to like perceive the light to her right as he was having that. It's just those kind of things were happening. Those kind of stories were being told throughout this whole journey, the whole retreat. And again, you feel like an alien telling these stories. But when he starts to come out with all of the scientific data on what happens to the brain when they are in that state, because he studied it and he tracks it. He has people, you see people walking around with these like things on their heads. They're basically testing for their brain waves. And he sees an intense amount of activity and a very heightened brainwave where the activity in the brain shows a really, really strong, coordinated, I don't even know what words to use, but there's a strong coordination and there's like really intense high vibration. You could see that the waves that are usually larger start to get smaller and more close together. And he has the readings right there. They're like right in front of us. And then you start to hear stories, and this woman came up and she had a stroke 2 years ago. And they usually say, if you're not getting the rehab that you need within like a couple of months, you got to live with it. So she was in a wheelchair, and she also at times would go in and out of like, well, she said basically she can't move, like almost total paralysis, where she said her tongue was sticking out of her mouth. This is what she was showing us like what she was like. And she would go in and out of hospitals and sometimes getting a little better with rehab. And then she discovered Joe Dispenza and then heard about the retreat, and she was like, I'm doing this, and somehow got in within like days. I don't know how she did that because it sells out, but maybe she was on the wait list. Maybe she described her situation and the team said, okay, let's bring her in. Who knows? So she ended up coming to the retreat, and she was telling this whole story standing on her 2 feet. Okay, so she was in a wheelchair coming in. She came in on a wheelchair. She could not walk on her own. And she ended up, sorry, my AC is in the background, but I want to continue this, so I'm just going to ignore that. So she tells us this story on her 2 feet, came in on a wheelchair. We did a couple of walking meditations, and she first had to hold on to her. She would get up and she'd go down. She'd get up, and she wasn't able to do it the whole time. The second time, she was able to hold on to her aid and walk very slowly. The third time, she was walking on her own. I mean, how do you explain this? He's had stories of people with stage 4 cancer in remission after his retreats. The stuff that you hear, you're almost afraid to say because of just so much of what happens is sometimes people get so attached to their beliefs or even limited beliefs that when you say stuff like that, it could feel offensive to some people. I hope that makes sense, and I hope you know what I'm talking about. But when people hold on to a reality, even if that reality is limited, they have a hard time hearing this kind of reality, that you can actually do something that has never been done or never believed to be possible. And the whole idea that he says is that you get into this unified state, the state where you're connected to being nobody, no thing, nowhere. And that is where the quantum field can be accessed. And so when you get to this state, that is when you're able to really get into your state of healing. And your body will revert back to the perfect state of healing. It will basically, you don't even have to do anything. It basically starts to heal itself. There are definitely things that you can do with certain meditations or focus on, or energy centers, things like that. But the way I see it, and as I've been telling you, like I've been seeing parallels with a lot of what I've already learned. It's very similar to how just regular meditation works, where you are getting to a state where you're so surrendered in the present moment that you are allowing this kind of energy of healing and harmony or allowing yourself to get into this state of harmony so that your body is able to heal itself. It's really that yin and yang, that steady yin and yang balance where you're allowing yourself to get into nothing. How do I explain that? You just get into this state where you're focused on one thing that is happening right now, whether that is anchoring yourself to your breath or a mantra. And what I find is repetition, something that repeats. If you think about waves, it goes wah, 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 wah. Like this repetition is what does it. It puts you in a trance. So the repetition could be internal mantras or it could be the breath. But that is what I find. And Dr. Joe uses a lot of repetitive sounds that do put you in a trance. And I get put into a trance when I listen to them. And I can feel in my brain how that repetition is putting me into a trance. And little by little, I find myself, and this is a practice on its own, it's a practice to get better and better and better at allowing the practice of meditation to put you in a state where you're really able to, you're becoming a receiver. You're receiving. And so he talks about the pineal gland as being something that is like a radio receiver. It's like an antenna. And when you get into that state, that is when you allow for healing to occur. And he's had people on with fertility, not during this retreat, but there are a lot of videos on YouTube that you will see where he has talked to people and seen people have kids and, go on to starting families after going through this. It doesn't matter what the condition is. If you're able to help with really severe conditions that doctors say are impossible, then it's like it could do anything. So I guess The bottom line is, it's not just me telling the story about Dr. Joe Dispenza. And of course, you can learn his method, and it is a very, very powerful method. But in the end of the day, it really comes down to any kind of meditation, meditating. I love his method personally, and I've been doing it now every day. So you could definitely look into doing that. I would definitely highly suggest before even doing that to really learn, take some of his courses online and really like watch it. But there are many ways to do it, and one of them is just meditation. Doing meditation every day. When you allow yourself that space of connecting really with that higher state, that quantum field, that state of what they call samadhi or nirvana, but that's like the enlightened state. But little by little, when you do get to doing a practice, you will revert to that state, because that is your natural state. That's actually the state that you are meant to be in. And that is the state of healing. That is the state where everything becomes clear. That is the state where everything kind of falls into place. And that energy where everything falls into place, it impacts your body, it impacts your mind, but it also impacts your life, because your life is a part of that ripple of energy that really emanates from within you. Many of us try to fix things from the outside in. They try to fix the outside, the material world, so that their inside could feel better. This is humanity's condition. It doesn't have to be. But the truth is, it's from the inside out. So when you do it from the inside, then it ripples. That's the true transformation, can only happen within. So when we're trying to control what's outside of us so that we can feel better, we're probably going to go in a lot of circles. It may work sometimes, but rarely does it really stick. So rather than looking at it in that way, see if you can shift your perspective and start to focus inward and give yourself at least, and I say a lot of times to my patients, start out with 5 minutes a day. Give yourself at least 5 minutes every day as a start to focus inward. And focusing inward can mean paying attention to your breath, or paying attention to body sensations, or just tuning in with yourself, or starting to repeat a mantra. And you can use the word I am. People use that I am. There's something about that mantra that's very soothing. Or you can use even the word calm or one. Those are words, and it is important what word you do choose. There are certain seed mantras that you can look up online, something that you really connect with, like hum. It does matter what word you choose, because certain words are more calming, and then certain words actually can cause an adverse effect to calming. So it is important, but they have studied the words calm and I believe even Om, but there are like many mantras that you can find online. So repeating a mantra is another way to anchor yourself. I do like to combine sometimes focusing on breath and mantra, and then sometimes focusing on the body, like scanning your body, tuning in with your body. And you even do that during your waking state throughout the day. Just remind yourself. Maybe put a reminder on your phone. Check in with your body. How am I feeling? How often do we check in on our body? How often do we go back into our internal world and check in on ourselves? And what you're going to find is through the practice, I do want to mention that you may actually start to have some very uncomfortable emotions or states coming up. I would say take them with open arms, take them as opportunities, because that's your nervous system releasing. So a lot of people going through Dr. Joe Dispenza have talked about like all of a sudden fears coming out. And they're like, why am I feeling that? I don't want to manifest that because I'm such an open state. That's like one of the things that people fear. But actually, it's the nervous system regulating itself. It's releasing emotions that are so deep-rooted. So allowing yourself to just feel them will actually move them quicker. resisting them will keep them in place. So when those do happen, don't let that stop you from meditating. Don't let that stop your practice. Just allow it to happen. So I'm telling you, meditation has changed my life. It's led me to studying all of this. And we just have so much potential as humans. And if I can make one thing my mission, especially on this podcast, because I do speak and reach a lot of people, it's to just let you know that as a human, you were born with intense, amazing potential. And don't ever let anybody convince you otherwise. Hold on to that. Hold on to your potential. Know that if you feel within your gut and your heart that you are meant to connect with that baby, do not let anybody convince you otherwise. You have that calling and that feeling for a reason. That is there for a reason. It is a real thing. I've seen it be a real thing. I can say I've done this long enough to start to see this. I've seen enough couples. I've seen enough gut feelings. It's not out of place. But it is a calling for you to start to believe in yourself, believe in your inner intelligence, your wisdom, and the intelligence that runs your body, and your body's ability to heal itself. So finally, I was able to express all of the stuff that's been sitting and waiting. When I did come home, I had what they call the Dispenza flu. I had something. I had fever. I had all this stuff going on. It wasn't COVID. Nobody around me who was even around me the day that I had it. And of course, I kept my distance, but even my husband stayed, slept in the same bed and did not get sick. Nobody got sick from me. So I felt like my body was burning off something. So a lot was going on, and I feel like my body was releasing a lot after the event. And they call it an upgrade. I'm not sure. I never get fever like that. I felt like something was getting burnt off me. And by the way, my fibroids feel smaller. I didn't do an MRI. I can feel them and I can tell. I'm very in tune with my body. They feel smaller. And I don't have to go to the bathroom as frequently in the morning. So those were things that I definitely experienced. So I hope that my story inspired you, if not to look into Dr. Joe's work, but also to start meditating or start some kind of practice where you are able to tune in with that intelligence, and also to believe in your own body. I hope this inspired you to believe in your own body. I love doing this. I love this community. This is a work of the heart for me. I could be advertising, and I'm not saying I'll never advertise, but I haven't. Because that's not my focus for this podcast. I'm not saying I'll never do that if there's something that I really believe in, but I don't know if you've ever noticed, but I don't really have much advertising. And it's not that I'm against advertising per se. And if there was something that I did believe in, I'm not saying I'll never do, but it's just not my focus. It's not like my main intention for this. My main intention for this is to empower people, to give people inspiration, because I know that there was a point in my life where I really needed that empowerment. And I know that sometimes through stories and through hearing other people's hope stories, it really empowers and provides hope to keep going in the face of so many challenges. So that really is something that I feel very much aligned with. And I feel like love for you guys. I know I haven't met you guys, and I met some of you because some of you have come out and reached out to me. But I feel a lot of love for this community. So hopefully this has inspired you in some way. And sending lots of love from my heart center to all of you. And I'm hoping that you will have a beautiful day and that you really got a lot out of this episode. So thank you so much for tuning in. Sending you lots of love. So that concludes today's episode. You can find all of the links mentioned on the episode notes. If you're enjoying these episodes, please take a moment to share and leave a review. Reviews mean everything to podcasters, and I really enjoy hearing from my listeners. You can also find me on my website at www.weeklong, thewholesomelotus.com or email me at info@thewholesomelotus.com. I love hearing from my listeners. If you're interested and want updates as well as a free ebook on my top 10 fertility boosting habits, you can visit my fertility page on www.thewholesomelotus.com. I thank you so much for listening in and hope that you have a beautiful day.